Hi everybody, this is Toffee bringing you Chapter 2, Part 2 of my Fire Emblem 4 LTC. This is the longest chapter of the run by turn count. We start off by finishing up our inventory management. Dew buys the magic ring here, but he ends up selling it before he does anything with it. Finn rebuys the speed ring so he can put more kills on the javelin. Edane's goal for now is to get to promotion as soon as she can without interfering with our other plans, so she will spend the early part of the chapter spamming warp. In Chapter 2, we want to make a pit stop at the Green Castle Nordion to recruit a unit, and then we have two castles that are very far away and are only reachable by mounted units at LTC pace. Then we have to backtrack in order to get to the final two castles. Alex sells his iron sword for another unit to use later on the map, and Arden returns Nisha's steel sword. I finally started to actually show weapon kills correctly here. Right now we only have one blue castle, so warp is functionally the same as a return. While foot units cannot reach Heirhein or Infini in time, they do have some dead time before we have to engage with the third castle. And we also only plan to send Midir, Finn, and Ethlin among the unpromoted mounts to the first two castles, so everybody else is fair game to be warped by Edane for EXP. He joined in the previous video, but say hi to Holland. Holland is a Myrmidon who joins at level 12 with a decent starting wallet of 10,000 gold. He comes with an Iron Blade and has follow-up in Luna. Luna is the third of the sword skills discussed earlier, and it is a proc skill that gives him a skill percent chance to ignore the enemy's defense when attacking. Holland will do something in Chapter 5 that leverages his skills. He's an alternate pairing candidate for Ira, which would free Lex up to participate in clears more, but Ira's kids don't really need an extra proc skill and benefit more from Paragon. Our first goal is to ride for Nordion to help Lachesis and her guards repel the Heirhein army led by Elliot, the guy from the previous chapter. The way they're positioned to start, they will reach Heirhein a turn ahead of Sigurd and Quan. A group of big brigands will also be dispatched from Infini, who will target the villages, and we cannot intercept them until after we conquer Heirhein. When we have so many units heading out from the start with similar amounts of movement, they often are forced to lose squares if their maximum move would result in a single unique square. Amongst the foot units, Dew is prioritized because we need to get him to the center as fast as possible. Lex, on the other hand, will actively slow down in order to stay next to Ira. You can already see the mounts pulling far ahead of the foot units as early as turn 2. Roads cost zero point 0.7 move, and as such, units with more movement to start with get more of a benefit from traversing them. Thankfully, Deirdre can still reach Ethlin in 2 turns, and this conversation nets us the Light Brand. This is the first magic sword we get, and is probably the best of them. At 1 range, it is a 12 might sword that weighs 5, while being C rank, and it will help Dew beat some arena fights by giving him a stronger weapon to use. At 2 range, it instead casts the Lightning Tome, which has 14 might and 5 weight. We won't actually see a Lightning Tome until Generation 2, but Lightning Magic has a weapon triangle advantage over all the anima magic types, and also is neutral towards dark magic, making it strictly superior. The Lightbrand is a bit on the expensive end, but we will make it a point to have sword users who are going to engage in intense combat try to use it in order to build kills on it, since it is definitely the best 1 to 2 range weapon that isn't a tome. On the first few turns, we have Etlin healed the pre-damaged units we prepared for her, and she even had the time to use Return on Edane on turn 1. One of Elliot's Lance Knights runs out ahead to attack one of the Nordion guards on turn 2. Initially, the Nordion guards have a defensive AI which will keep them in place. I do make it a point to rig strength level ups on Edain, just to improve the stat inheritance for her son later. On turn 3, the rest of Elliot's goons will assault the Nordion guards. Each individual hit is not too bad, but I think the greens do need to dodge at least some attacks in order to survive. We do like them getting damage in order to produce future healing targets. Klon and Sigurd with their 9 move will run through the center, while Ethelyn, Midir, and Finn will stay on the road and run up. Alec also moved ahead as much as he could in order to participate at Nordion, while Nisha was hanging back to act as a warp target for Edain. Lachesis is recruited by Sigurd. Lachesis joins at level 2 with rather shaky base stats, but she has one of the most impactful promotions in the game to Master Knight. She only has 6 move for now and has A swords and C staves, but she will still help out on this map, and we also want her to promote by next chapter. Recruiting her will cause the AI of the Nordion guards to change. They'll move to attack enemies in their range and otherwise will try to stay around Lachesis. This is immediately annoying in that they would have been better off defensively if they just stayed put, and also there is the issue that in order to promote Lachesis in time, we will need to send her to the front lines, which means we will have to deal with their annoying AI. Nordion Castle stays green, which means we will not be able to warp units to it. We do have a strong disincentive to let it fall, because if we keep the 3 green paladins alive till the end of the map, they will give Lachesis the Night Ring, a very valuable holdable that can give an infantry unit canto that will be required for several turn saves. In a change from prior LTCs, we will actually be pairing Lachesis in this run. This is rather challenging because she doesn't have a very high love base with anyone, and we also obviously would like to actually use her on the maps. But there's one pairing that is just about doable, and it also has some meaningful advantages for a ranked run. In fact, pairing Lachesis is necessary for one new turn save I'm going to show off later in the run. It does utilize a glitch, and there is a different mutually exclusive turn save that should be doable even without pairing Lachesis. But if someone were to find a way to combine those two turn saves, they would need a paired Lachesis. And pairing Lachesis would still help a bit with the alternate strategy that I mentioned. Lachesis only passes Charm to her kids, since while she does learn follow up after promotion, it is a class skill. Casually, you would expect her to be paired with a father with follow up, and a unit called Beowulf will join later in the map who has a love conversation with her and would pass follow up. However, in a rigged ranked run, we don't really need follow up to be inherited on her kids, as there is a ring that grants the skill that they can simply buy when they need it. This, of course, requires money, but her husband in this run will be Dew, who passes down Bargain to them. He doesn't pass Soul because sword skills can only be inherited by sword infantry, and both of her children start off on a horse. We do care about the resistance of her daughter, and Beowulf would make that stat a bit harder to rig as well. Pairing Lachesis with Dew will still be an undertaking, and in the process, it led to another new discovery in Chapter 4. Quan killed Elliot to grab the Silver Lance. He's the only one who can use that weapon for now. Alec continues to put kills on the Steel Sword on this map. Something to note about pairing units is that both the passive love point growth and the bonus love points for being adjacent are added at the start of a turn. This does not apply to green units, and as such, Dio and Lachesis did not gain passive love points until the start of turn 5. Additionally, another implication is that ending turn adjacent on the final turn of a map will not grant bonus love points going into the next chapter. This makes Dio and Lachesis' pairing quite tight, and while they do have a conversation giving them 50 love points, they would still need to gain 58 adjacents across 55 turns. And those 55 turns include turn 4 and turn 5 of this map, where we can't actually get them together given Dio's walking speed and Lachesis' precise EXP plans. 58 is greater than 55, but fortunately there is a certain glitch that will help these two lovebirds find each other, and in fact will be relied on for 3 of our pairings to go through. Over here, Quan got in range of Philip's squad to get them to move forward. Their line is wide rather than deep, and this means our horses can punch through the top to keep up their march to Heirhein. The armor that was baited over by Quan is a prime target for Alec to pick off, and Alec will bait over 3 more armors. Armor Knights usually carry 2000 gold around, I mentioned earlier that we care about building kills on the light brand, and since Evelyn has it for this segment of the run, this means we are feeding her kills. She does have decent stats by this point and the option of critting, so it's not too bad. Philip the General Boss drops the Return Ring, which is the first high value droppable ring of this map. Like the stat boosting rings, it costs 20,000 gold, but it gives a unit the ability to return themselves back to home castle. For a unit with Kanto, they can activate this ability if they have at least one square of movement left over after taking an action. This has clear synergy with the return staff, though for now we actually want it on Quan to let him get back to home castle on a certain turn. Midir diverts off to the left to pick off a couple of ballistae. He does not actually need to use his full movement, and this lets him get some uncontested EXP. Philip is very bulky, so we get a lover crypt with the help of Etlin to finish him off with Quan after Sigurd weakens him, since Quan wants to pick up the return ring. This is an example of Lachesis' guards being annoying. They steal this one armor kill. The brigands have reached the villages, and the first village to be attacked has the bargain ring. Castle Heirhein is guarded by another general boss who's actually rather non-trivial to deal with. We opt for Quan Chip into an Ethlin Lover crit kill, which will also net Ethlin the barrier ring. This is done for monetary reasons. We will eventually want to pass down a lot of gold to Ethlin's son, who, in an inversion of the usual norm, inherits his inventory from her, with her daughter inheriting from Quan, and the barrier ring is around 10,000 gold for that purpose in sellables. Note that stats do not follow this particular inversion, though Holy Blood does. So Etlin's son will inherit his mother's minor Holy Blood and only minor Holy Blood from Quan, while Etlin's daughter inherits Quan's major Holy Blood along with Etlin's minor Holy Blood. Arden will take over the job of setting up healing targets for Lachesis and Edain for a few turns. I delayed having Dew give Lachesis the gold for a few turns in order to avoid him leveling up on enemy phase. His earlier conversation with her gave her the Thief Sword, a sword that lets any unit steal money from enemies. Lachesis doesn't exactly need it though. Dew fills up her wallet, which will come in handy shortly. You might be able to get away with giving her less, since as you'll see, she ends up overflowing with money later in the run, but I didn't really think of an item setup for this at the time. You could probably also figure out a way to stagger out the gold dump into multiple gifts, which if done in enough places could help Dew gain an extra level over my run by the end of Generation 1. Heirhein is seized on turn 8. This will turn the yellow Lance Cavalry from Infini, who were blocking off access to the north, red, and this also makes the Brigands attackable. The turn after we seize Heirhein, two new units join from the furthest village, Lewin and Sylvia. Lewin is a bard, essentially a 6-move mage who also has a currently useless C rank in light magic. Lewin has Major Forseti Blood, meaning he can use all wind magic, and in contrast to prior LTCs, we actually want to train him a bit. Specifically, we want him to promote by the middle of Chapter 4 in order to grab a certain side objective, which will also help us get a free pairing. He comes with Adept and Critical, but no follow-up, meaning he can cheese the arena but doesn't get reliable kills on regular enemies. His pal is Sylvia, the dancer. Up until now, the pace was straightforwardly set by Sigurd's movement, and while Sylvia can't quite keep up with him, with the return and warp staff, we will try to get Sigurd to dance around each castle seas to save turns. She's too far away to be relevant to Infini seas, and for now we'll just help Lewin kill the brigands to get started on his training. Sylvia has Adept and Miracle and will rely heavily on Miracle to get through the arenas. Sylvia's level ups only matter for the arena, so we micromanage them to hit the Miracle benchmarks. Sylvia is the first prospective mother who will actually not be paired in this LTC. This is for a few different reasons. First of all, the substitute for her son can get a special staff that is directly needed to save a turn both in incomplete recruitment and ranked. Additionally, she just doesn't have a lot of potential husbands at LTC pace. Alec is probably the most practical, but he wouldn't really do much since his kills would not meaningfully make her kids' lives better for ranked, and he can't even really provide useful inheritance for her son. Before I forget, I should point out that Dew gave his leftover money to Edain so that she can afford to spam staves in order to promote by a certain point in chapter 3. The substitute for Sylvia's son comes with Paragon, which is just miles better for ranked, and he is also financially self sufficient, as you'll see. Her daughter would benefit from inheritance and miracle, but we can't even pass her the most important purchase for the Generation 2 dancer, so it doesn't accomplish much. Juan talked to Finn to give him the Brave Lance. The Brave Lance is an excellent one-range weapon that will be able to one-round armors. Brave weapons are only B ranked, and this means that Sigurd will be able to use it later in this chapter, but until Finn can get to a castle, it is locked to him. Now that Heirhein is seized, we finally have a warp destination that isn't the home castle. We set Holland to Heirhein so that he can visit the villages in the center of the map to raise money. This will let him buy the Paragon Ring during the next chapter, effectively farming a few extra levels as a result without contesting map EXP for other units. Nobody else really gets as much mileage out of this, as Holland neither cares about pairing nor does he have other jobs to carry out. We repair his Iron Blade because he's going to tickle the limits of his wallet. Lachesis came with a Miracle Sword, which he will use to beat the arenas in this chapter and the next. This means that we will need to micromanage her level ups. and as such, she is another example of a unit with anti-benchmarks. Up top, a group of sword knights begin charging towards us. Amongst them is the recruitable Beowulf, who we need to pay 10,000 gold to recruit. And the boss who drops the Paragon Ring I've been hyping up so much. The Paragon Ring, as the name suggests, grants the Paragon skill. This does not stack with Lex's innate Paragon, which doubles a unit's EXP. This is most impactful in the arena, which has higher level enemies in general than the ones on the map. The Paragon Ring normally costs 40,000 gold to buy, and it sells for 20,000 gold, and is why units want to fill up their wallets as soon as they can. Arena winnings are typically 17,500 gold, meaning you fall 2,500 gold short. Units also have to pay for weapon upkeep, of course. Units do gain gold at the end of each chapter for most of the castles under our control, but if they're going to fall below the 40,000 gold threshold, we will have to put in special effort to get the money. The Paragon Ring is what ends up being the primary expense for a lot of our units, and the evidence of this will be how much the gold of units with Paragon or Bargain will grow without the Paragon ban tamping it down. Finn runs up into the pack of Armor Knights with his Brave Lance. We also have Quan transfer all his gold over to Ethlin. This will allow Ethlin to reach the necessary 40,000 gold to buy the Paragon Ring later. I have Lewin skip one of the brigands, but maybe you could shift things around so you actually feed him an extra kill. His EXP plan does end up being a bit tight since he's a foot unit. With the different sequence of hits, Finn could have gotten a better miracle on this turn, but I was preparing for him to activate it against the Sword Knight squad. Arden is sent off to Heirhein to pursue his famous Pursuit Ring event, but he had a few turns to spare, which is why we delayed warping him over there. Near Nordion, you see the first instance of jealousy in action. Jealousy is a bug that manifests as certain women stealing the adjacent love points that nearby women would have grown with another man. The priority list for who gets to steal the love bonus depends on the man and is probably tied to the internal order of units in memory. If we were to arrange three women and a man in a square such that the woman diagonal to the man had the highest priority between the three, you could gain double adjacent bonuses per turn, which is in fact the secret to how Lachesis and Dew can gain an average of more than one adjacent per turn by the end of Generation 1. We don't, however, pull that out quite yet, and instead Deirdre will act as an intermediary to allow Dew to build points with Lachesis, even when we want Lachesis and Dew to end turn not strictly adjacent to each other. Ethlyn could do this as well, which would permit a jealousy square, but she's busy actually helping out with the clear. The boss of Infini is another beefy general, and he comes with a shield ring to boot. We have Quant work on weakening him in order to feed the boss skill to Midir, who we do want to gather some gold on. We have to do an Iron Burn here despite this being a miracle enemy phase because Finn is so far forward that the enemies can use the boss's leadership stars to actually dodge his attacks. He pulls about 90 hit with the javelin against enemies on the road, and in 1 RN with so many rounds of combat that adds up. This enemy phase is the biggest argument for rigging more skill on Finn in his early level ups. We had to get Finn up to 19 speed and give him the speed ring to double these sword knights with the javelin, and he had to start the enemy phase at 14 defense or less. Generally, the zero damage AI of enemies mostly only comes up with sword users, since they tend to have lower strength to begin with, and their weapons, especially earlier in the generation, tend to be weak. Fortunately for us, Beowulf is a bit faster than his friends, and he does not get doubled by Javelin Fin, which lets us stack all these kills on it. The boss, Waltz, has Adept as a class skill, which can be nasty playing casually. To kill Waltz, we have to have Finn chip him down for Quan to kill with an Adept proc. This nets Quan the Paragon Band, saving a 40,000 gold purchase, and he could return home and make his way through the arena with it to stack more level ups. The ideal unit to use to recruit Beowulf is Lex, since he does not care about his gold, but he's busy pairing with Ira, so we end up having to use Midir for the job. Beowulf starts out with 12,000 gold as a result of his recruitment, and he comes with follow up and onslaught. He has pretty decent base stats, with B swords at base and gaining a boost to A on promotion. Beowulf also gains Adept on promotion, which will help him put kills on the Steel Sword in later maps. Beowulf's B swords before promotion is the other reason why we wanted to put kills on the Steel Sword rather than the Silver Sword, since we do have Beowulf get some action on the next map. We intentionally got Midir damage earlier, so as to give Ethlin healing targets later in the map. Ethlin immediately returns Sigurd home because the next castle we assault will be Makariy through the central corridor. We can't warp Sigurd directly to Nordion due to it being green, and this will give the units who stayed behind a chance to contribute and see combat. We had Ethlin sell the Lightbrand for Dew to buy, and he will put a few kills on the weapon while also using the 2 range to steal money better. We wanted to have him buy it on this turn for positioning reasons. We place Nisha in range of the enemies guarding Makali in order to pull them out. There's a group of Ballistic who spawn on the cliff who don't have great accuracy on our units but will continue to pelt them, and they cover the area near the castle and in the upper part of the corridor. The boss himself has a sleep staff, which in the hands of the enemy has infinite durability. We also see some enemies spawn near Augusti Castle, including a squad of Pegasus Knights who will slowly make their way down towards our home castle. Quan clears out the Chapter 2 arena on this turn. We don't want him to grow too much defense in order to avoid some enemies near the end of the map seeing 0 damage on him, so we will keep him at 21 defense or less, yet another anti-benchmark. 0 damage AI is really the biggest motivator for anti-benchmarks in this game. We wanted to ensure Lex had 20 defense for this segment to prevent the Myrmidons from attacking him. Our cavalry can pull off hit and runs to draw the enemy squad backwards, with Ira being exposed to ballista danger as a side effect of trying to pair with Lex. Ira does end up having a few turns of leeway in the end, so maybe you could route the worst of these turns out. The enemy AI does seem to have a particular fondness of targeting Myrmidons, which we will actually take advantage of in the next chapter. Phil cleared out the last arena fight earlier, and he dropped off the Javelin, Brave Lance, and Speed Ring since he was done with them. We wanted Finn to reach at least level 15.40 in order to promote off of the arena next chapter, and he ended up going past level 17. Now that he's past that threshold, Finn is an EXP thief, and we would prefer not to give him kills, and he will complete his EXP grinding in Generation 2. Sigurd will buy the Brave Lance and Javelin to use later in the chapter, and he uses the arena for an HP refill. Past strategies would have had him bite the speed ring eventually as well for the sake of a boss kill in chapter 3, but I figured out how to route that out. Quan ends up quite rich as a result of the money he gathered from droppable items and the arena, which is good. While Quan's daughter does not really care to inherit anything from him, we want Ethelyn to have access to a lot of money to set up her son's inheritance for Generation 2. Once Quan hands in the Paragon Ring, it is Ethelyn's turn to visit the arena. Ethelyn has to go through the whole arena in one go, but with all the great level ups we rigged for her earlier, she's quite competent, and we also don't need to worry too much about rigging level ups for her now. On the previous turn, Edain warped Deirdre up to Infini. This is for a maneuver that we complete on this turn. Sylvia grabs the bargain ring. She also gets 2,500 gold for her troubles. Sylvia is not exactly great at raising money by herself, but she needs to make some big purchases soon, so the bargain ring helps slash her gold requirements in half. In fact, it is so powerful that in a change from previous LTCs, Sylvia is financially self-sufficient and never needs Dew to give her gold during Generation 1. After Ethelyn, the Paragon Ring passes to Lachesis, who also takes the chance to buy and repair the return staff. Lachesis will clear the first two fights in the arena since they are easy enough to rig, and will then canter towards Makariy. Dew will stick right next to her. We need Lachesis to get some kills to reach her promotion in time, and so we will have to deal with her Paladin's AI again. Edain now sells the broken warp staff. Deirdre can then buy the warp staff and the return ring that Quan sold, and will start walking down to return Lewin and Sylvia home so they can clear the arena. And so Lewin can recruit one of the Pegasi who's flying down, and Sylvia can help save a turn. Midir and Etlin will run off to the right to help manipulate the enemies for the final castle. We would of course have liked to have Etlin return Lewin and Sylvia, but we need to transfer the return staff over to Lachesis both for her EXP and to save a turn. So this maneuver is going to be Deirdre's one true LTC contribution. Finn doesn't really have anything he can do, so he will ride down to grab a village. The reason we wanted Arden to be a staff target was to save up the damage on the Green Paladins to give Edain and Lachesis staff targets later. It's a real beating, baiting out the Makariy enemies since the Myrmidons double him. We set things up so that Azel can kill several enemies on this turn. Beowulf starts his arena run to heal himself back to full to avoid bleeding gold to castle healing. He will pause for now because the first seed for him to beat the Myrmidon at fight 4 is very far away, and it gives him a good level up to boot. Azel kills 3 enemies on this enemy phase and ends with 1 HP. Lachesis returns Azel so he can eventually kill one of the Pegasi later. With Lachesis and Dew moving as far as they can each turn, Dew is in range of a couple of Lance Knights, and also manages to steal some gold off of the Archer. Dew is also in range of the Duke Knight from the first Augusti wave. Lachesis' charm does help Dew's avoid for the following enemy phase, and he will get to harvest some gold off of the enemies who attack him. Due to how the Lightbrand works, Dew will not face weapon triangle disadvantage when attacked at 2 range by a javelin. We placed a few units ahead of Dew and Lachesis so that they can unclog the path on the next turn. Sigurd and Quan have almost caught up to our other units, and we need to ensure that their path forward will be clear on the next turn. Ira gets to show off the power of Astra to delete the Duke Knight, and Alec finishes unclogging the way. We see more broken axe action from Lex to set up a kill for Dew. Between Adept and Critical, Lubin can massacre the arena. He doesn't exactly crave perfect level ups per se himself, but we will rig them regardless to improve the stats he will pass down to his kids. I do try to rig him crits to save weapon uses as well, but his family's goal does not end up being particularly tight, and there were bigger screw ups that could be fixed that I will call out later in the run. I think I was mistaken earlier. Lex's Broken Axe chip was for Lachesis' benefit. We just about wipe out the Lance Knight wave before the second wave from Augusti has reached us. Not sure why the Paladins chose to go for the Armor Knight first before they tried killing the Lance Knight, but oh well, not that it affected anything. The return ring was to let Deirdre send herself back home. Sylvia generally relies on Miracle to get through arenas, and with her low base strength, that will mean some incredibly long fights that I will speed up, much like Dew's fight against Fight 7 of the previous chapter's arena. In fact, part of why we aggressively rig strength on Sylvia is to let her avoid breaking her sword in at least some of the arena fights. Due to my insistence in avoiding the arena level up glitch, I do have to ensure my dancer has a backup sword in cases where they'll break a sword to land the final hit. Sylvia here takes the iron sword Alec used to have. Vulcan is already coming in handy to reduce her weapon upkeep expenses. Dew stands where the enemy armor used to be, but we actually do kill off some of the Augusti cabs because of the way enemy canter works. They would end up blocking Dew off quickly and not actually all donate money and EXP to him. Sylvia intentionally gets hit once by the Myrmidon at fight 4 because her stats are not spec'd to deal with him naturally, and instead she will use castle healing to set up the miracle for that fight. By returning home, Deirdre also brought the warp staff back to the home castle, and while she will use it later for a particular maneuver, for now she will simply spam warp in order to grind EXP. We rig one of the green paladins to miss the scab in order to feed him to Dew. The boss of Makariy seems to have a strong preference for sleeping player units, but I found a seed where he would sleep one of the green paladins instead. The Miracle Sword that Lachesis has can only be used by women normally, but there is an asterisk that we will see in the next chapter's arena. Dio missed the paladin, but we can adjust our strategy to ensure he does eventually still steal from him. The other reason, beyond Kanto, that we pushed Dio so aggressively forward was to let him steal from the boss on this turn from the spot 2 left of him. That is Arden's well-known follow-up ring event. Arden will actually make use of that item on the next chapter, though we eventually will want to transfer it over to Ethlyn for her son to use. Since we're going to be pretty careful about our pairings, after Ethlyn's son promotes, the follow-up ring is not a very contested item in Generation 2, and Lachesis' children will be able to use it at the times when they need to have follow-up for map work. Sigurd finishes off the boss and gets the Sleep Staff drop. Sleep is incredibly pricey at 30,000 gold and only comes with one use, and it will work against any target that has lower resistance than the caster has magic. It is far more effective in enemy hands than player hands, as we'll see in Generation 2, thanks to enemies having infinite durability on their weapons and staves. And in Generation 1, its sleep is simply a staff that we want Edain to eventually bite to pass down to her daughter, and stores 15,000 gold for Sigurd in the meanwhile. With her extra HP level ups, Deirdre is able to get past the hero completing her arena. Now it's time for a maneuver that saves a turn. Lachesis returns Sigurd home, which frees up the castle as a warp target. We could just dance for Sigurd and warp him back, but we want to also boost Quan forward, and Dew is clearly out of place to continue pairing with Lachesis as well. Instead, Deirdre warps Sylvia to Makariy, and Dew gives her a dance target for this turn. We enclose the enemy paladin with a wall of combat units to ensure Sylvia and Edain are safe from being attacked. Mihir gets into range of one of the javelin armors near Augusti, which will get him and his buddies to move out to avoid clogging up the way later. Ethlyn trails him and gets Zane's cavalry squad to start moving forward faster by baiting over a bow knight. Flynn gets the Ironbane sword, which you may know better as the Armor Slayer. We don't get much mileage out of this weapon for now, as it will join Ethlyn's inheritance package. Here, Beowulf finally gets his fight with the Myrmidon done. Sigurd also finishes the arena for a final potential HP refill and repairs the javelin for use later. Deirdre sends him back to Mackley. Sigurd and Quan can then be danced by Sylvia, completing that optimization. With the Lightbrand and a couple of stat rings, Dew has the power, hit, and avoid to beat the Lance Armor. We have the room to let him do one arena fight a turn, but there was a seed for a good level up on the next fight right here, so I just had him do two fights in a row. Meteor kills two armors on enemy phase. He would have better odds with the killer bow since then he could either crit or proc onslaught, but this seed was easy enough to find. Lewin baits down a couple of the Pegasi. Sigurd pilots the Javelin to pick off a few enemies, and in the process, the Javelin gets to 50 kills. This is our first kill based crit weapon, and it unlocks new possibilities for units without critical. We will still continue to build kills on it, and in fact, we'll get it to 100 kills by the end of the generation. I have Alec finish the arena here, but in hindsight, I should maybe have let one of Alec or Beowulf not finish their arena until the final turn and leave them intentionally damaged in order to get an extra staff target on Deirdre on the final turn. And in fact, I have Edain sell her men staff for Deirdre to use here. That was because of some poor planning on my part. If I had done the healed staff switcheroo last chapter, then I could probably have avoided this. And the reason why this is important is because Edain wants to pass the men staff down to her daughter eventually, and the men staff is rather expensive to move around. So this ends up being some wasted money. Quan procced Adept in order to kill the boss Zane to get the Rider's Bane, and then we have Quan and Sigurd set up in a specific formation. Sigurd is hiding behind Quan, and as such can only be reached at 2 range, and the Bow Knights will prefer to attack Sigurd, given his lower defense. Quan has exactly 21 defense, which will prompt all of the one range enemies except the Troubadours to go for him, and thanks to the Rider's Bane's effective damage, he will be able to one shot all of them in order to gain quite a bit of EXP. Edain buys Warp back so she can eventually return Lachesis' home, and she also gets in an extra Warp use on Lex in order to farm more EXP. Nisha was sent back to help Lewin deal with the Pegasi since he's a bit squishy to take on all of them simultaneously. Pawn clears Sigurd's way, and it's time for cleanup. Dean returns Lachesis home so she can do all of her remaining arenas. Sending Sylvia home on the previous turn gave her a crucial extra turn of castle healing, which will let her beat Fight 4. Lumen walks up to recruit Erinys. Erinys is the first and only flyer in Generation 1. Flyers are rather nerfed in this game because they do not gain the benefit of road tiles, but there are still several strategies that leverage their ability to fly over rough terrain. Erinys will eventually marry Lumen. She has follow up, meaning her kids will always have it, and Pegasus gain Adept on promotion. Lumen and Erinys have a special event in Chapter 4 which causes them to marry instantly, but previously it was believed that this was not obtainable at LTC base, and thus they had to be paired manually, if at all. This run will show off a new strategy, which as a side effect will allow for that conversation, which frees up Erinys and Lumen to be more useful in general. This same strategy is what will let Lumen grab his special weapon in Chapter 4, and is what requires Lumen to promote by the middle of Chapter 4. We want Erinys to promote by the start of Chapter 4, but for now all we can do is ensure she clears the arena. We fly her down to a spot where she can be in Sylvia's dance formation on this turn. Beowulf finishes his arena on this turn, and Sylvia completes her arenas as well, since her stats do line up correctly for the fights after Fight 4. We will then push Lachesis through the arena, and then have her walk outside and return Nisha for EXP, get danced along with Deirdre, and then return Erinys home to finish the arena. Lachesis needs to get to 15.40 by the end of the chapter in order to promote after the next chapter's arena. I rig Erinys' levels to a ridiculous extent, including eventually capping out her magic. You could probably adjust some of my later strats to not rely on these overinflated stats, but I was really excited about the changes to Chapter 4 I alluded to, so I didn't want to take the risk of failing the strategy due to insufficient stats. Beowulf has a talk conversation with Lachesis, which gives her some extra stats and 100 love points between them. Despite the conversation granting more points than her conversation with Dew, Beowulf can't get as many points as Dew can in this chapter due to his later giant time and his faraway giant location. And as you'll see, Lachesis only barely pairs with Dew in time given a certain other pairing that interferes with the jealousy formations. At the end of the map, Yamka will finally beat Fight 7 of the arena with a repaired iron bow, and rig it so he gets a decent level up, and also sets up Sigurd to one round the boss of Augusti, Chagall, with the Brave Lance, which requires him to land 3 out of 4 hits and gets him the Physic Staff, the first ranged healing staff of the game. I also have Alec talk to Sylvia just for fun. That'll be chapter 2 in 21 turns. See you next time!